This is the Magazine Fund Information Session 2021. My name is Matt Hilliard-Ford. I'm the program consultant. I work in a number of different areas within Ontario Creates, but the Magazine Fund is my main area of focus. Also with me, meaning at her home, is Kate Blair, who is the program coordinator. Some of you are probably familiar with Kate from email and perhaps phone communication. The information session is not a substitute for reading the guidelines. A lot of information from the guidelines is in this session, but this session is by no means a comprehensive rendition of the guidelines. So always refer to the guidelines as well. So here's an overview of the Magazine Fund, some high level points. If you're familiar with the fund from previous years, there are no significant changes. I will note a few, but the overall eligibility requirements, the overall funding levels have not changed. If you're eligible to apply, you can access up to $75,000 in funding. It's non-refundable. The amount you can access depends on your eligible sales revenue, and we'll cover that in a bit more detail. And we'll support up to 75% of a project budget, capped by the amount of funding that you are eligible for. The fund is competitive, meaning all applications are reviewed. We don't have funding to support every single application that we receive, so it is competitive. And the deadline for this year is May 28th, 2021, 5 p.m., no later. Eligible sales revenue is also, there's also detail on page 10 of the guidelines. Okay, and so this is, we've had 16 cycles to date. So this is the 17th cycle. And in those 16 cycles originating in 2005, we've supported 645 projects, invested almost $25.5 million, leveraged $47.5 million in budgets, and generated through those projects approximately $76 million in revenue, which feels really good to read that, and jobs and growing. Every year we do this, we get to expand those numbers. So over those 16 cycles, 63% of the applications we've received have been supported, which is a pretty high rate. The average grant size is $39,470. So you'll see there's a difference between that and the $75,000, which is the maximum you can be eligible for. The average grant size is well, like almost half that. And we receive, of the applications that we receive, 70% are consumer, 30% are B2B or trade on average, and the funding allocations reflect that as well. So of the applications we receive, we support approximately 70% consumer and 30% B2B or trade. The number of applications that we receive each round varies somewhat. So over the last 5 years, 2016 was like, I think it was 52, went up to around 62, dropped back down to the high 50s, then down again to the low 50s. And then last year, we weren't entirely sure what to expect coming into the deadline. But it was a significant leap up to 71 applications that we received last year for obvious reasons. And some more detail on the intake for last year. So again, it was the 16th cycle. We received 71 applications, 42 projects were funded. Of all the applications that we received, 11 were digital only publications. The others were print. And we had 12 first-time applicants. We normally receive maybe like a handful of first-time applicants. So this was a significant jump, actually in both digital publications and first-time applicants. And you could look at it in a way that those two categories made up for the spike. Now, here are some objectives to keep in mind if you're considering applying to the magazine fund. And Ontario Creates is an agency of the Provincial Ministry of Tourism, Culture, Sport, Heritage, I think is in there now. They add categories every few years. So we have an economic mandate. So we are, our purpose, our reason for being is to strengthen and grow the Ontario economy through revenue, through jobs, via support for cultural businesses. So these objectives are embedded, integrated into the magazine fund and the other programs that we run. And so things to keep in mind when you're thinking about your company, when you're thinking about your project, when you're thinking about the types of activities that you might be applying for support for. And how to communicate that in your application. When we assess eligibility for the program, we look at the eligibility of the applicant company, and we also look at the eligibility of the magazine title. We also look at the eligibility of the project itself. So again, I want to remind you to check the guidelines for the full eligibility criteria. There's more than is listed on this slide. There's more than I'll refer to in this presentation. So please take a good look. If you have any questions, contact Kate or myself, and we are happy to discuss your eligibility. If you're a first-time applicant, absolutely, definitely, 100% contact us before you begin your application to verify your eligibility. Canadian-owned, Ontario-based, incorporated, sound financial position, in good standing with us. That last point means that if you're a current or previous client of the magazine fund, that you are up to date with your deliverables. So if you're a first-time applicant, that doesn't apply to you. Publishing and related brand extension of your magazine or magazines, that you are a magazine publisher at the time of the application and anticipate continuing to be should you receive funding, and you achieve a minimum sales revenue of $20,000. And we'll take another look at sales revenue, but that does not include donations, that does not include other grants or funding amounts. And we look at your magazine. So again, please refer to the guidelines, look at the eligibility requirements in that for your magazine title. We've split the eligibility requirements into two different sections in the guidelines. So if you're print, you can look at one section. If you're digital only, you can look at another section. Again, come ask us any questions. So these are the top line requirements. I can let you read those for yourself. We don't support new magazines from new companies. You do have to have completed a 12-month publishing cycle. You do have to have achieved that minimum revenue threshold of $20,000 that was in the previous slide. If you're an existing established publisher that do meet the requirements for the fund, a new project could be the launch of a new title, whether that's in print or digital, but you do have to already meet the eligibility requirements. Circulation, for prints, at least 2,500 copies per issue. Digital, we're looking for minimum of 15,000 UMVs to your website. If it's an app-based product that you have, a minimum of 10,000 active subscribers. If there's a closed access subscription or paywall, maintain a minimum of 2,500 active subscribers. An applicant doesn't have to meet requirements for both print and digital. So if you're a print magazine, just look at the circulation requirements for print. If you're a digital only magazine, just look at the circulation requirements for digital. There is a new document that you have to refer to this year. So especially for those of you who've applied before, this wasn't a document that was in existence before this round. It's called the Program Policies document. There's a link to it on the Magazine Fund webpage. I believe there's also a link to it within the application form as well. And it's requirements that are across most of our funding programs. There's information about financial statements that you need to refer to. There's information about accessibility, diversity and inclusion, some other things that are escaping me right now, but please refer to that document. It is a component of the guidelines. So click on that link on the webpage. It's also linked to within the guideline PDF as well. So please make sure to refer to that. In order to access the application form, you need to register with the OAP. This is a procedure that's overseen by our IT team. And there's information on how to begin that process in the guidelines and definitely on the Magazine Fund webpage. Takes a couple of days, so please get on that sooner rather than later. If you've applied before, you're already registered, you don't have to worry about that. Once you have access to the OAP, you can navigate your way to the application form and begin building your application. This is not something that you can dash off in a day or in a few hours. It's something that you're going to want to spend a good few days, I would say 1 week to 2 weeks of dedicated focus. We're asking for detail. We're asking for various types of information. It's not something that you can dash off in the last minute. We highly recommend that you collect and build the information outside the application form and then upload to the form, copy and paste into the form and save regularly. So you can save as you go, but we highly recommend that you keep a copy of all the information outside of the application schema as well. Accidents do happen, applicants have lost information. It's very frustrating, it can be very stressful, as you can imagine. So please take care of yourself that way. Highlights of that: register now, get on that today if you're not already registered with the portal, and begin familiarizing yourself with the application form. Keep a version outside the form, save as you go when you're in the form. Activities. So the program is very flexible. What we're looking to support is activities that make sense for your business to be doing right now. So we need to see that articulated in the application form. What does your company need to be doing right now? Why does it need to be doing it? How's it going to do it? And what is the impact? What are the outcomes of this project? Projects can be marketing focused and outward facing, new titles, video content, new website, ad focused campaigns. Projects can be focused on data, data collection, data analysis, sales, efficiencies, internal workflows, CMS updates, that kind of thing. We're really, really very open. Again, I'd recommend that you contact me and Kate if you have questions about whether your project is eligible, or even if you think it's eligible, it can always be helpful to have verification from us. As this program is competitive, we're looking for as much detail as possible. One of the questions I get asked quite a lot is, what are we looking for as a funder? What are we looking for? And it always feels like the person asking the question is looking for, it feels like a leading question. They're looking for some kind of preference, some kind of theme that I can share with them of where, you know, we really think this is what magazine publishers should be doing. So we're going to support these kind of projects if we see them. It is not that way at all. To strengthen, to grow your company, your titles. So think about it that way. What works for you and why? So we offer project-based support. So a project has specific activities and it occurs in a specific timeline. And this is all information that we request specifically in the application form. We're also sensitive to the fact that it has been an incredibly trying year. Last year, we created some flexibility within the program to support more operational type costs. And that means that you could, in essence, apply for a project that is the publishing of our next 2 issues. So this is just an example. So normally, in a normal year, we wouldn't support the publishing of your next 2 issues, but recognizing how trying this time in history is, as an example, you could apply for that, but you have to apply for it thinking of it as a project. So 2 issues, it occurs in a specific time frame. These are the specific costs attributed to publishing those 2 issues. And importantly, these are the specific outcomes. So the jury is always going to be assessing what the outcomes are of a project. And does the support you're requesting translate into outcomes that are meaningful for you and are meaningful for us as a funding agency? So whether that's advertising revenue, whether that's maintaining relationships with advertisers, maintaining communication with your audience, etc., etc., etc. So again, think about the objectives, that objective slide that I showed you earlier, and those objectives are in the guidelines too. All right. One of the things that we request is a SWOT analysis. If you don't know what that is, SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And there are questions in the application form that guide you through this analysis. So an example might be you're a publisher. Strengths might be you publish quality content that's appreciated by your audience and advertisers. You publish to a professional standard, you have brand awareness, and you have loyalty. You have strong relationships to readers and advertisers. Weaknesses are generally internal to the company. So perhaps your weakness is your audience is print-based, print costs are escalating, opportunities to distribute print are narrowing. There's a lack of understanding and experience about new platforms and technology. You perhaps have outdated workflows, work systems, work culture, fear of change, uncertainty about a strategy to move forward, a lack of resources to explore alternatives. Perhaps your advertisers are beginning to demand digital solutions more and more, and you just don't have them yet, or don't have the solutions that they're requesting. So what are the opportunities? Perhaps there are new platforms for distribution, new audiences you can access, non-traditional partnerships that might become available to you, new revenue models that might become available to you, new marketable skill sets that you can accrue. So think about your business in this way, think about your project in this way. How does your project address these things? Threats are external, so whereas weaknesses are generally internal to your company, threats are like what's coming in from the outside. There's obviously the big one right now is COVID. Closing retail, closing newsstands, issues with distribution, other sorts of distribution in certain cases. Other threats could be declining print readership, print revenue associated with COVID, but also that was existing before as well. Ongoing competition from non-traditional media, new platforms, emergent technology, changing habits around how we as consumers consume our information, and uncertain revenue models. You can apply for international business development. Obviously, travel is unlikely at this point. Perhaps it's going to open up in the new year, perhaps not. For travel to industry markets, to events, for targeted business meetings abroad. You can also include costs to attend magazine conferences where you're being exposed to information about best practices, new technologies, that kind of thing. So in today's age, even if those are occurring online, you can apply for the costs to attend and create marketing material for those events as well. If you are applying for travel costs, like travel outside of Canada, we would want to see a contingency plan in the case that travel continues to be either forbidden or challenging. So if you have a business that relies a lot on export activities, we want to see a COVID-proof contingency plan in your application. Eligible sales revenue, which I referred to closer to the beginning. You can access up to $75,000. To access that, you have to have eligible sales revenue of over $2 million. So that left-hand column is the eligible sales revenue that you have to be reaching as a publisher. And then the right-hand column is the maximum that you can access for each tier. So if eligible, and again, eligible sales revenue is it's advertising revenue, subscriber revenue, could be event revenue if those events are occurring underneath your magazine brand. Any of those type costs, it does not include donations, it does not include funding. So you've got to back those out. And in the application form asks you, just asks you specific questions that gives us the information that we need to make an assessment of whether you're applying for an eligible sales amount. Very important, if you're a company with revenue less than $140,000, that bolded statement, centered statement at the bottom of the slide is for you. An example of that is if your eligible sales revenue is $20,000, the maximum you can apply for is $5,000. So just be really clear. Again, if you have questions, contact us. This has happened a few times, and I know it's really galling for the company who's put together an application for a certain amount, and there's no way they're actually eligible for that. And this information is on page 10 of the guidelines. We require from you as part of your application form financial statements for the 2 most recently completed fiscal years. They have to be either audited, review engagement, or at a minimum, notice to reader, prepared and signed by a third-party accountant who is a member in good standing of a provincial branch of the Chartered Professional Accountants. So they got to have CPA after their name or CA after their name. This, if you've applied before, this may be different for you now, so pay heed to this slide and this requirement. So the 2 most recently completed fiscal years. So you might still be in your 2021 year. So at the very least, we would expect to receive from you your statements for 2018 and your statements for 2019. If you haven't yet completed your 2020 fiscal, don't worry, provide 2018, 2019. If you've completed, but your financial statements won't be available by the deadline, again, provide 2018, 2019 statements. Hopefully that's clear. We require a budget. There is a budget template. There's a link to the template on the Magazine Fund webpage. There's a link also in the application form itself. Please use our budget template. If you provide an application on your own template, your application won't be eligible. No prior expenses. So activities and expenses are only eligible from the date of submission. So whether you submit on the deadline or if you submit before the deadline, which we highly recommend, expenses are eligible from that date. Labor costs, make sure they're realistically valued. Provide us, if the cost is, if there's an hourly cost or a daily cost or a weekly cost, please provide that. You'll see the budget template requests that information. Our jury, our external jurors are very close to the industry. They know the industry well. They know what labor rates are, so please be realistic. They'll sniff them out if they are not. Admin expenses are capped at 15% of your budget. Capital expenses are also capped at 15% of your budget. If you are using any external services, please provide a quote. It's really helpful for us, for the jury, to have a quote to back up the information that you've provided in your budget. It's also really helpful to provide some information about the vendor that you're using, why you're using one, why you've chosen the one that you have. It's reassuring for us to see that information because it demonstrates that you've done your planning, that you've had conversations with potential vendors, that you have quotes. You can provide more than one quote. If you haven't made up your mind yet, that's fine too. Provide that information. It really bolsters your application, makes it more competitive, gives you more of a chance of receiving support. All financing must be confirmed at the time of application. So financing can include your contribution as a company. For that, we want to see a letter from your bank, or it could be a bank statement, it could be a screenshot. Include that in your application. If there's a third-party contribution, we want to see confirmation of that. So a letter, an email, upload that with your application. So donations, in-kind costs can be part of your application. So we support up to 75% of your project budget. Whatever's remaining, it can be a cash contribution from you, from a third party. It can also be in-kind costs. We want to see confirmation of those in-kind costs. So a letter confirming that there's an agreement around those in-kind costs. Really crucial part of the information that we request is the expected results. So there has to be a meaningful correlation between the project budget from the amounts that you're requesting from us in funding and what you're expecting. There has to be a return on investment of some kind, and this is a significant portion of the marks of the decision criteria for us when we assess your application. And we look for the expected results in 3 separate phases. And again, the application walks you through this. So the first stage is the project phase. We call it phase 1. It's the phase in which, if you're successful, you're going to receive funding from us. The example I use here is if you're redeveloping your website. So phase 1 is going to cover the development and the launch of the website. So there may not be actually any revenue to report, any increases in traffic to report. The work that's occurring is the redevelopment of your website. Then you launch it. So we also want to know what your expected results are in phase 2, which is the 12-month period after funding has ceased. So in this example, you've launched your website, you're beginning to see revenue, or you're anticipating seeing revenue and increases in audience growth, audience engagement in that website. So there's a space in the application form where you report that information. And then there's a third phase, which is the following 12 months. So your website is more established, your advertisers are more familiar with it, your audience is ideally growing, engaging more, there's more content on the site. What are the expected outcomes for phase 3? We love seeing revenue growth. We love seeing company growth. We're also looking at company strength, company solidity. So there can be qualitative projections, spin-off benefits to the project, things that aren't necessarily tied to a number or a metric. You could include those. We love seeing those. We love seeing that you've thought about the qualitative outcomes, and then the quantitative, the numbers, the revenue, the engagement. So give it a good think. What are the expected results? Again, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this project? So the deadline is 5 p.m., May 28th. There are no exceptions. You can submit the application before the deadline. Another way of putting it is the deadline is the last day you can apply. And we strongly recommend that you plan with the objective of submitting before the deadline. It's less stressful for you. Often people leave it to the last minute, and often it gets very, very stressful. Do yourself the favor of planning to submit your application before the deadline. And another incentive for that, other than avoiding stress, is costs are eligible from the date you submit your application. So if you're looking at a project beginning before you've heard whether you're going to receive funding or not, those activities and costs are eligible from the date that you apply. Okay, so the timeline. All right. So once you've submitted your application, what happens next and how long does it take? So once we've received all the applications, so May 28th, the next day we begin our eligibility and completeness assessment. So we look at each application. Does it have all the documents that have been requested? Does it look like the application form has been filled out adequately? i.e., is it a complete application? Does it meet the eligibility requirements that we have? If it doesn't, it's ineligible, nothing further happens with it. If it is eligible, then it gets forwarded to the jury. There's one internal juror, so one person from Ontario Creates who's on the jury. There's also an external industry jury. These are often people who they are consultants in some form or other in the magazine industry. They're not on salary with publishers, i.e. they are not competitors. They sign a confidentiality agreement with us, which is very important. So they know the industry, they know the business, they're very well informed, active people in the industry. So these are the people that you are addressing in your application. And then we make our recommendations as to what should get funded, and we make our decisions as to what gets funded, and then we notify you. So that takes between 9 and 12 weeks. So in an ideal world, if all goes well, we would be informing you about your application by the middle of August. Okay, and these decision criteria are in the guidelines, so you can refer to them there. I won't go into them in detail here. One thing I'll point out is that in previous years, we had a diversity bonus. You could be awarded up to an extra 10 points if your company or your project had any elements that addressed diversity and inclusion. What we've done is we no longer have that bonus, but we've embedded that criteria within our regular decision criteria. So you'll see language around that. So if there are any diverse aspects in your company, in your publishing company, in your workforce, in your ownership, if there are any elements of diversity, inclusion, and equity in your project, speak to that in the application form. Okay. If you are successful, congratulations, you now have to do the project. And so how do we allocate funding? So you've been approved for a certain amount of funding support. After that notification, you go into a contracting process with us. You'll receive an agreement, you review it, you sign it, you send it back to us. When we receive it, we'll issue 60% of that approved funding amount. In most cases, we require an interim report from you. That's done via the OAP, the online application portal. There's a template that you fill out, text fields, there's a cost report Excel template that you fill out. You submit that by a pre-decided date. It gets reviewed, it'll get approved ideally, and then we will issue the next 25% of the funding amount. And then the same thing happens with the final project. Template, cost report, submit it, it gets reviewed. When it gets approved, you get the final 15% of the funding amount. And obviously the reports are an update on the project that's been approved. Okay, so what are we looking for? Specific information. Be sure that your proposal is to the point. Do not fill the pages with jargon and buzz terms. They're not helpful to us. We need detail to assess how viable the project is and why it's relevant to your company. Simple, be clear, be direct. Don't bury us in technical specifications. If it's a technically focused project, we do want to understand it, but don't overload us with technical information. Be clear about the goals. Be clear about how you're going to reach the goals. Be realistic. So when you're estimating your return on investment, when you're estimating the market interest in what you're doing, be reasonable, be rational, and back it up. The jury is very aware of what's happening out there, and they're going to sniff through any inflated projections. And so always back them up. Always back up your assumptions. Make sure you have a rock solid case, especially if you're aiming high. Just provide us the detail to reassure us that you've thought this through and that you can support these projections. Complete, be sure that you're filling out all the necessary fields, that you're adhering to the parameters of the program. Remember the program objectives that we covered in the beginning, and be sure to leave some time to go over the documents prior to submitting them to pick up on those typos. Questions to ask yourself and your team: what is the project? Why are we doing it? Why are we the best people, the best team to do it? If there's gaps in our experience, then who can we bring in to fill that gap? What are the steps we need to take to get us to the end goal? And again, can we back up our assumptions? How are we going to back up our assumptions? Again, if you're hiring people in, a web developer, whoever it is, provide us with a rationale. Why are you choosing them? Why are you selecting them? What's their track record? If you've worked before, tell us why. And again, include a quote, include a scope of work if it's relevant to the project. It's really, really helpful information for the jury. Okay. Tips: review the guidelines many times. Refer to the guidelines. If you come to us with questions and you haven't read the guidelines, we're just going to send you back to the guidelines. The more specific your questions are, the more helpful we can be. If you have questions about your eligibility, either as a company or for the project, contact us. We're happy to give you feedback. If you're a first-time applicant or if you haven't applied for a long time, please contact us before you begin your application. Prepare your documentation. If it's your first time, register with the OAP. Prepare your information outside of the OAP. Make sure it's well written, no typos. Ensure that you've provided all the information that's been requested. Don't throw a bunch of corporate information at us. Tailor the information to what we are requesting. Include quotes, include resumes, relate research. So we want to see research to back up your choice for this project. We want to see research to support the outcomes that you're anticipating. This research can be your own company research based on your own experience, what you see with your title or your titles. It could be research about the magazine industry, so trends that are happening in the industry overall as they relate to you. It could be research about your specific niche. It could be research about the specific project that you're trying, the strategy that you're embarking on. So research about other companies. So an example would be if you're trying to, if your project is to establish a membership model. What other membership models have you studied? Where have they been effective? Where are you doing the same? Where are you going to diverge from what you've researched, and why? Have you looked at membership models that other magazines are doing? Or is it more helpful to look at other entities in your niche that have membership models that you're looking to? Like, include that information for us. Really provide the information so we can assess why this is the right decision for your publication, for your audience. Ask questions. Please ask us questions. We can't review any material before you've submitted it, but we can ask any. We can field any questions that you have about the application form, any queries you have about the type of information that we're asking. We're here to help. Yeah, typos, errors. It's really helpful if you have somebody who hasn't been involved in compiling the application to review it before you submit it. They're much better positioned to pick up on those errors, or say, you know, this isn't quite making sense. It's not quite clear to me what you're trying to do. You want somebody to be that voice for you. Again, back up your assumptions, feedback. So whether your application is successful or unsuccessful, we can provide feedback, but you have to ask for it. We really appreciate it when you do ask for feedback, because it's we have valuable information to share with you about your application. But again, you have to ask for it. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope that this has been helpful, and please contact us with any questions. We are happy to help you.